So tell about New York, please.
So I went to New York as part of a theater field trip. We literally left the day after Christmas, 2009, and stayed until the day after New Year, 2010. And it was quite the experience because my teacher, this was actually like right around the time I got diagnosed with autism. I had literally like just been diagnosed, had no idea what being autistic meant because no one explained autism to me. And my autism just ran amok throughout that entire trip. Like, for example, I definitely I lean towards the demand avoidance type of autism, especially when it comes to like cleaning, which can be very difficult for other people. The other girls who I was sharing the room with were not happy that I was not clean and my clothes were everywhere, which they had every right to not be happy. Don't get me wrong. But I didn't know how to explain why I just wasn't cleaning when they asked me to. So we would get in these fights, and then the city was like already really overwhelming because it's really loud. There's lots of people. And to top everything off, we went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I love art. And one of my special interests at the time was Japan. And so when we got to the Japanese section of the exhibit, I got overwhelmed in my autistic emotions and I had an elopement and I was gone.
Wow.
I was gone. Like I had no idea where I was. I was just walking aimlessly and I was separated from the group, and we were on a really tight schedule that day. And so I was just like sitting there, and I didn't have my phone because my teacher had taken our phones away from us. Bless you. My teacher had taken our phones away from us because he was like, no, I want you guys to live in the moment. So we left all of our phones in these lockers in a locker room. And so I'm wandering around without my phone to be able to contact anybody. Can't figure out where I'm at. I'm in a strange city. The Metropolitan Museum is very overwhelming because a lot of the rooms are echoey. So therefore, like, I can hear everything all at once. And I was just, after about like 30-40 minutes of me wandering around the Met, which is a really big museum, I just consigned myself to the fact that I was going to live and die in this museum. Like, I was just going to live the rest of my life and die here because no one was ever going to find me. And finally,
a life in the museum.
Huh?
It's a life in a museum because it has the movie A Night
Exactly.
at the Museum. Met
Exactly.
is the museum of the movie.
No, that's the New York Museum, which is different than the Metropolitan Museum.
Okay.
But the New York Museum is also pretty big.
Yeah,
but the Metropolitan
that's why
Museum,
I was asking.
The Metropolitan Museum is even bigger than that one.
Wow, no. Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I got lost, and when my teacher did find me, no mind of the fact that he was the one who lost me and he was the one who was in charge. He berated me for ruining everyone's day because we were now way behind schedule, and we were so behind schedule, in fact, that he basically like canceled our next event and was like, we're going to spend the next 2 hours in the museum exploring more of the museum. And then he was like, so just all of you guys just go explore the museum, right? I sat in the locker room and read a book for that entire 2 hours because my brain was like, I am not getting lost again. You will not trick me, sir. And then he got back to the locker room, saw that I was reading, and he was like, is this what you did with your spare time instead of experiencing the museum? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you were the one who got lost. You could have explored more of the Japanese exhibit. Why didn't you? And I was like, because I didn't want to get lost and I already explored it. And he just kept berating me about how I had ruined everyone's trip. And I was just like, sir, I could be calling the police on you for losing me. I am a child. I wasn't like a child. I was 15 at the time, so, but still.
Yeah, of course. His responsibility for sure.
Exactly.
You were not supposed to be worried about this stuff. It's adult stuff. You were totally right. So you were diagnosed with in your 15, 14, something like that.
15. This
15.
was like literally right after my diagnosis. I got diagnosed like in the fall-ish. Yeah, it was fall of 2009. So,
And do you remember like your diagnosis process? And it took a while, I
yeah.
believe, for you to be diagnosed, and probably because there was many misconceptions on what autism is. So tell us a little about this journey for the diagnosis.
So my parents had four, well, technically with all of us, there's six daughters. I am one of six children.
Wow.
All daughters. And what's really funny is one of them is adopted. They couldn't even, they were trying for a boy, which is how they got so many of us, and they couldn't even adopt a boy. They were just like, nope, gotta get another girl, match the set. But I'm the second to youngest, so my mom had at that point four other children ahead of me, and then we adopted the other one on the way. But my mom, when I was very young, she realized that there was something different about me than my siblings. Like she realized that I was different at 6 months old, because she could stick me in front of the TV, and if Barney was playing, I, at 6 months old, would just not move. My eyes were glued to the screen for 30 whole minutes. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but for a child younger than one, that is unheard of.
Yeah.
And my mom just kind of had this look, I'm thankful, but that's real weird. So she throughout the time I was growing up and I was like in my infancy, like she realized that I was slightly delayed in speech. I said my first word at 2. That was usually babies start speaking around like 12 months is when they say their first word. I didn't say my first word until 2. I was 22 months old. Which is like, it's still normal, but with the hyper focus and everything else, my mom was just like, okay, you're a little weird. You're the weird kid. Got bound to have one. That's cool. And then around like 4 or 5, she realized that I was just really developmentally delayed socially. I didn't make friends that much. I had a lot of difficulty socializing with other children my age. I didn't really play with them. I played beside them. And all of my friends were all older kids because I didn't know how to communicate with people my age. And my mom was like, okay, it's time to start fixing this because that's weird. And so when I was 5, she took me to a specialist, and they gave me an EEG. And I was 5. No one explained to me what was going on. They just stuck this weird, funny hat on me to measure my brain waves. And like, I remember them sitting me in the chair and putting that on, and they told me, okay, sit still for as long as you can. And I was like, dude, I'm 5. You're not gonna, I'm 5. I'm gonna be doing what I do. I'm gonna be bouncing off the walls. And so they studied my brainwaves. They did realize from the studies that my brainwaves were not neurotypical. I am 99% sure, I cannot confirm this, but I'm pretty sure this is what happened. I'm pretty sure that from that moment, they realized that I was autistic, but because I was a girl, they refused to give me the diagnosis and instead diagnosed me with ADD, which is real stupid because this was 1999 or 2000, actually. No, it was 1999. This was 1999. ADD had been out of the DSM for like since the last DSM. It had been out since the 80s, so they already were misdiagnosing me as per usual. And they started me on a lot of different ADHD medication, and I do have ADHD comorbid with my autism. Like, I do know that now, but 90s ADHD medication is a whole other story, and it just caused all these adverse effects. And so my mom finally just started, okay, we're not gonna do the medication anymore, because I was ripping my eyelashes out. I was getting sick and depressed. And so at one point she was just like, okay, she likes guitar, she wants to be a rock star, let's just give her guitar lessons. And finally, because I had a special interest, I was able to focus and do things and function for like a little bit. And then I had to be homeschooled because I was being bullied so bad because I was socially ostracized. And then when I got back, sorry, this is such a long-winded
No,
explanation for
no, you can go. I am loving, and I am just writing some things that I want to ask you as you tell me things. So
awesome.
I'm loving. Please, please.
And then around 14, I got back into public schooling from homeschooling because my mom said, "It's time. I'm sick of you. Go away."
I need some time,
and
please.
I was just really not doing well in public school. I was crying because I couldn't make friends. I couldn't socialize. I was just not very good at any of this. And when I finally did make some friends, we decided to skip school one day. Well, not skip school, but skip a class, an algebra class. And we immediately got caught because we were just sitting in the hallway and the security guard came and saw us and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" And my brain was like, "We're skipping." I was like, "Let's just get the punishment."
Not good at lying.
Yeah, never have been good at lying, despite being an actress. And so when we went to the guidance counselor to receive our punishment, she was just, I don't know, there was something about this guidance counselor where she was like, "Okay, there's something else going on here. Like, you don't seem like the kind of kid to skip class, so what's up?" And I explained to her, I was like, I can't function. I don't make friends. I don't do well with school. I don't like I'm smart, but I feel so stupid in comparison to everyone else because I can't do these things like everyone else does. And she was like, "That's not normal. That sounds like tism." Like, she didn't say that, but like that was her thought process because she immediately set up a meeting with my mom and the special education department. And she was just like, "Hey, this is not," like, she could just smell the autism on me. Like, and so she explained to my mom that I was experiencing transitional delays. And she recommended to my mom that we go through the county and we start getting me tested for autism.
Okay.
And the whole process took about a year. I was going to a lot of doctors, and no one ever explained to me what autism was. No one no one ever explained to me anything about this process. They were just like, basically like, "Hey, we're going to hook you up to this machine and we're going to test you. Hey, we're going to hook you up to that machine and we're going to test you. Hey, you need to answer all of these questions. We need to measure your IQ." And I remember them telling me, they're like, "You realize your IQ is like 144, right?" And I was like, "Great. What the fuck does that do to help me? How does that help me with math? What good is a large IQ if I can do nothing with it?" Like, but in the fall of 2009, I did finally receive a diagnosis. I remember that day exactly. Like, the doctor literally came in, looked at me, and I wasn't looking him in the eye, and I was just kind of rocking back and forth on the bench thing. And he's like, "Oh, your daughter has," and this is, what they diagnosed me with at the time. But they were just like, "Your daughter has atypical Asperger's syndrome." And my mom was like, and I remember I looked at him and I was like, "What's that?" He looked at me and then he looked at my mom and he's like, "So your daughter has autism?" And I was like, "Okay, you're just going to ignore my questions. That's fine. Not like I'm in the room or anything." And that is the story of how I got diagnosed with autism.
Wow. It's a lot to take it. I believe for you because at the time you probably you knew nothing about that, right?
Nope. I did not actually start learning about autism until, I started learning bits and pieces in sophomore year, like shortly after I got my diagnosis. People explained to me that it was a transitional disorder, not that like it was it, but it had to do with me. The biggest thing that actually was explained to me was that I had difficulty switching from one task to another. So the mode in high school where you switch from one class to another, it's extremely hard for me as an autistic person. So they, as an accommodation, set up a basically like a blank slate class in the middle of my day so that I could just regroup and work on like homework and things like that and try and process everything that I was going through throughout the day. It was also a really good class to sleep in.
Yeah, I can imagine because a lot happening at schools. Like it is a lot of information, of noise, of people, of things happening. And so you finished your high school, so all at school.
I did finish high school. I graduated with a 2.5 GPA, which is average. And I was happy to get average because I sucked in school. I was not like, I was a smart kid, don't get me wrong, but my biggest issue that I had was homework, where like I would do my homework, but somewhere between putting it in my backpack and bringing it to school, everything would get lost every time. So like I was not great with homework, but like in class assignments I was good with. And when I eventually started getting teachers who actually understood and respected that I had a different learning style than everyone else, they would just like they would just let me through. Like I had one English teacher who said I was so advanced for his class that he didn't even care if I showed up. He was just going to mark me present. And he said I could go to the library. So for all of junior year, I didn't show up to my English class. And I sat in the library and played Neopets all day.
And
I passed that class with a straight A.
And at that time, the things with the friends were better because before the diagnosis, you were with. You told me that you had the bullying things.
Yep.
But then at high school, how were things at that time?
I found this lovely little club called Anime Club, which I learned later in life is basically autism club because basically everyone in that club was autistic. We made great friends. We spent time in high school together. We had fun. We laughed. We joked. It was nice to have friends. And then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. I moved halfway through high school. I did move from Rancho, where I had gone to school, to San Jacinto, which was a huge transition for me. But I did make friends there in the drama department, in the theater department, because I was over dramatic and therefore a theater kid. And masking for so long had taught me how to be an actress. So I wound up being one of the best actors that they had in the group, which is why I did eventually, after graduation, I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, where I got the highest level of scholarship they have ever offered to any student. They never offer full scholarships, but they offered me about $12,000 in scholarship there.
Wow, that's really nice. So you finished your high school. You had to move during the high school. You had to move to one city to another. And then, how old are you now?
I'm 28 years old.
28. So then you did to do to a school of to be an actress, right? That it's not a university. It is.
AMDA is an accredited university, so I did get my bachelor's degree, but it took me a lot longer than neurotypical people would. And it also took me longer because I was poor. In my third semester, I finished my third semester of AMDA because I immediately went to school, which was actually really great, because I didn't have time to I didn't have to change my I mean, I had to change my schedule, but I didn't have to change my routine that much because I was still in school. So I was like, okay, I'm still a student. That still makes sense to my autistic brain. And it's just basically every class has to do with my special interest, which is performing. So I'm great. I'm having a grand old time, except for the bullying and the ostracizing because I was the only autistic student there at the time. Like I was literally the only, or at least the only openly autistic one, which was fun in a sarcastic sense. That was where I received the most bullying because they would pretend to be my friend and make fun of me. And I thought they were being friendly, but they were actually making fun of me. I cried so much during that time. And when they told me at the end of my third semester, they were like, hey, you haven't paid for next semester. We can't let you come unless you pay. I just kind of gave up. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go home. That's fine. Because I was just so tired of the bullying, which actually wound up being a good thing. I spent 5 years getting more comfortable with myself, getting more comfortable with my autism. I spent a lot of that 5 years really learning and delving into some autism media to try and learn, because that was actually how I learned more about autism, was through watching movies and reading books, fictional, obviously. And a lot of these, which most of them I would now say are pretty harmful, actually. But for me, they were my gateway into the community because for once it felt like actually like somebody was telling me about me. And when I came back to college 5 years later, because I finally had the money to do so, I was now one of like 3 openly autistic students, which is really funny because I visited that college now and there's such an autism community thriving. Like there's so many of them. Like half of the time I'm running into like 5 or 6 different students when I go to that campus. When they see me, they're like, oh my God, you're autistic. I'm autistic. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so many of you. Like there's just so many of them now. But I was able to, when I came back, I was one of like 3 openly autistic students and I was able to build a community with them. They're all 3 still my friends. Like, well, 2 of them, the other 2 are still my friends and I still talk to them all the time. But I was able to graduate with really, really good grades. I got my bachelor's degree. And then immediately after that, the pandemic hit and everything shut down and I was not able to work. But wow. I was able to join TikTok and finally actually insert myself into the autism community and really be a part of it.
Wow. And when you arrived at the university, how was your approach usually for a professor? You said like, I am autistic, some things that you will need some accommodation. How do you usually do that?
I usually go up to the teacher the first day and I tell them. If I can meet them before the first day, I try and tell them then because I don't want to interrupt. But I always go up to them and I let them know like, hi, I'm autistic. These are the accommodations that I may need. I try to keep it simple because I went to acting school. I didn't really need quite as many accommodations because acting school is, pretty easy to acclimate to for autistic people.
More hands-on.
It's really hands-on, and on top of that, the way that AMDA in particular is run with punctuality was so easy for me as an autistic person to pick because I'm one of those I need to be 15 minutes early or I'm late autistics, and that was actually AMDA's policy. If you're 15 minutes early, you're on time. If it is like time for class to start, you're late, you can't show up. And everyone else had issues with it. I didn't. I was at class every day. But on top of that, most of the accommodations that I had was I just need to take my notes on a laptop so that nothing is like lost. I need to fill out all my paperwork on laptops because if I try and keep it in physical form, it's gonna go bye-bye. Like, and most of my teachers were really, really accommodating to that. I think during my entire time at AMDA, I only had like 1 or 2 teachers who were not great at accommodating my disability. And I like I had one teacher purposefully throw me into a meltdown, unfortunately, which she got fired. Shaheen
Great.
Voss, if you ever see this, you're a jerk, and I deserve better.
Totally, definitely. And when you told me about the period that you stayed on homeschooling, uh, do you wish you had been homeschooling for a longer period instead of going to school? Like after all this time analyzing, how do you feel like? Do you think that you would suffer less?
I think that college would have been a lot harder for me, and I don't think I would have had the same opportunities to really delve into performing, because like even though at that point I knew I didn't want to be a rock star anymore, I was like, I want to be an actress. Like from the time I was like 12, I was like, I'm gonna be an actress. I'm gonna act. I'm gonna win an Oscar. I'm gonna do all that. I'm gonna be famous. And I didn't really start delving into it until freshman year when I joined drama at my first school, and I started auditioning for plays. And I told my mom, I was like, I'm going to be an actress. And because I was doing all those plays, my mom realized that I was serious about it. And then around 15, she started taking me out to auditions. Like she started putting me up on casting websites. I did when I was 16, I did a small short film for a horror company, and it never saw the light of day. I have no idea where that film went to, but I know that we filmed it because it was a weird film too. And then, I was in my first professional play like 3 weeks after that here in Hollywood. Made a lot of friends, made a lot of connections, and I've just been performing ever since. And I don't think I would have had those opportunities had I been homeschooled. Yeah. I mean, maybe some of those opportunities would have been easier because, I could have I wouldn't have had to skip school or anything like that. But I don't think I would have been as ready to do them because I wouldn't have had the play experience.
Yeah. It is because in the United States, it is different because it has lots of extra activities. Here in Brazil, we don't have these. We have more like you were at school, you were in the class. So you are seeing math, science, our language that is Portuguese. So you don't have lots of extra classes. So this is hard for students with autism because they have to be pretty much inside the box. That it's every student, it is like that. And I am saying this because my son, he's 11 years old. He will be 12 in the end of the year. And he's at the 50th year. So we have lots of academic contents, and many of these contents doesn't make sense for him. Yeah. It is too much for him. But unfortunately, here in Brazil, we are not allowed to do homeschooling. Can you believe that?
What?
Yeah. So we are in a situation that parents, they have to send their kids to school, even if school is not the better, it is the best place for them. Because for me, it's all about my son being happy. He speaks, he communicates, but he has his delays, academic. So now, for example, we put him in a robotic class to study about robots. He likes that. He loves dinosaurs. Yes. But we have
the dinosaurs are amazing.
Yeah, he loves so it is a problem because he needs to bring his one thing with him to school. And then we have the schools not wanting him to take his thing. Like he needs one thing with
You
him.
know, I actually did that in college. I started taking this little stuffed cheetah that I had. Her name was Spot, and I used to tell people she gives me all my best ideas. Um, and what was really fun about acting college is at one point I actually had to do that for a class, and I had to create an improv character based off of my cheetah. And so I wound up being like a child with an imaginary friend, kind of like Calvin and Hobbes, if you've ever read those comic strips from like the 80s and 90s, where like Spot was my imaginary friend and we were like superheroes fighting and saving the world and things like that. I passed that class with an A because of that stuffed animal.
Yeah, you had this liberty, especially because I think that it was acting class, so you have more freedom. It was not something like your books and paper and everyone just writing and writing. So here is what we have. So this is really bad because we need to give each autistic what he needs, what he likes it, and respect that and be open minded to that. So that's the point that I am right now, and it will only get worse because next year, for example, he will have like 6 or 8 teachers, and for him to handle and for us to talk to each one, and not all of them will be open. So like many parents, they pass through this situation. We are like we have a proposal of a law that regulates homeschooling, but this could take years to pass in the Congress.
I really hope
So
that you guys get it passed, because
yeah.
I don't think that, even though I think that I needed to be in school,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that every student needs that.
Yeah.
Because my best friend, she was also homeschooled my whole school time. Like, she started getting homeschooled in the 3rd grade, and but her mom also gave her the choice. Her mom told her, like, you can continue to homeschool or you can go to public school and be with friends. And she chose homeschooling, and she chose homeschooling all the way through till college. And she did not need to be in public school. She hated people.
Yeah.
She hated people. She's an introvert, and so like homeschooling really did not. Homeschooling worked for her, and
Yeah.
public school didn't. I do not think she would have done as well in public school, but and homeschooling allowed her to succeed. Me, I needed public school. I needed to be homeschooled for the time where I was, because I was getting bullied so badly,
Yeah.
but I needed to be in public school later on.
Yeah. And nowadays, do you have, I don't, talking to you, I don't think that you have social interaction problems. I don't know
I
if it is
do,
because,
actually. I have a lot of them.
but maybe more on relationships,
Yes.
like when you were a friend. What I mean is that like you have no problem or you don't stay embarrassed to arrive in a place and greet people and or a class or make a question in a class, like this kind of embarrassment.
I do struggle
Really?
with those, actually, a lot.
Okay. Okay.
Communicating in classrooms is really hard for me. I'm able to, like, the reason I'm able to talk and be so bright and bubbly right now is because I'm in my home environment.
Yeah.
I have my shark wall behind me. Oh, you can't see my shark wall from this angle.
Oh, let me
That's my
see.
shark wall. Wall filled
Oh.
with sharks.
Oh, my
But
my son would love that because he loves animals. Dinosaurs are his favorite, but he loves all the animals.
dinosaurs are top tier. Sharks are my favorite, obviously, because I love sharks. But when I'm in school and classes, and public spaces. Like I just had a really, really bad incident at my former job, where, and it was of course a friendship incident where like somebody expected me to read their mind and I wasn't able to, and that completely shattered the relationship. I have issues like that all the time, which is why I get really scared of making new friends, and having new romantic relationships, because at some point everyone seems to expect me to not be autistic, because when they have these short interactions with me like this, I can talk just fine. Except for the times where, like, the times that I have the most embarrassing moments with my social interactions. Oh my God, I still struggle with this one. The embarrassing memory. And I want to point out, before anyone says anything, this woman and I are very good friends now, but it didn't start off good. During my 5-year break from college, I was at community college doing plays there. I met a woman and she was telling me this story about the time that her neighbors called the police on her. And on her and her children, even though her children were fine. And I said, you know why they did that? And she said, no, why? And I said, because you look like their stereotypical thought of a white trash person. And I didn't realize that I was essentially saying she looked like white trash. And that's not what I meant. It was awful. And she hated me for so long for that entire play, which I get. I would have hated me too if I realized what I was saying. And then like 3 weeks later, I was telling somebody else in the show, I was like, I'm autistic, so I'm kind of weird and socially awkward. And she literally turned and she's like, wait a second, you're autistic? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh, everything makes sense now. Because her son is autistic. So she realized why I said what I said. And that's why she and I are friends now, because
she forgave you.
She's so understanding. She's a great autism mom. Like I don't use that like phrase lightly, but like she's one of the good. She's a parent who really genuinely understands and listens to autistic people. And from that moment on, she was just like, okay, now you make sense. You're not an asshole. You're just disabled.
Great story. And it's so funny how she didn't realize that you were autistic, because like she was, oh, I can't believe that she's autistic. So it's even her having a
no, the second I said
child.
I was autistic, like literally the second I said it, she was just like, oh, everything makes sense. Like she didn't doubt me for a second. Like she was just like, oh, it clicked. You're not an asshole.
Yeah.
Which is not the usual reaction that I get. A lot of the times people are like, you don't seem autistic. And I'm like, why? Because I'm not like your stereotypical 4-year-old child. I am an adult and I am famale. But this particular parent has been in the autism community long enough that she was the first person who I ever heard use the phrase, if you've met one autistic person, then you've met one autistic person. And she actually taught me some more about autism that I didn't realize. Like she was the first person to tell me that like I didn't feel like she was the first person to tell me that my bladder issues were autism. And I was like, what do you mean that's autism? And she's like, yeah, you have bladder issues because you're autistic. Your body's not telling you before you have to go to the bathroom that you have to go to the bathroom. That's why you get chronic UTI. And I was like, oh,
it makes totally sense. Now it was you like having a click.
Pretty much.
And let's tell people what it is, masking autism. So the ones who doesn't know what it is, so let's tell them on your perspective, what is masking autism?
For me, it's like pretending to be, it's like acting. It's being on. It's basically performing neurotypicality for everyone. It takes a lot of practice. And even so, I still have to practice. Like, I didn't realize before how terrible I used to be with facial expressions. I didn't used to emote very much, and I had to practice emoting. I had to practice like moving my eyes in a way that would like convey different emotions. I've had to practice reading other people's emotions a lot as part of my masking. And I still misread it all the time, especially people who smile when they cry. Which is why usually, like, as much as I want to help people and I want to be empathetic, the second I can't tell the difference between smiling and crying, if I can't figure out which one you're doing, I leave the room. Because I'm just like, I'm not gonna risk saying the wrong thing here. I'm gonna go.
I don't want to be in this tough spot, please.
Exactly, because I'm gonna guess and I'm gonna guess wrong.
You have 50-50, but usually it goes wrong.
Every time. Like, oh my God. There was an incident in high school where a girl fell off of the risers and like a chair hit her. And I thought she was laughing because her face looked like it was laughing. And I started laughing because I was like, oh, okay, we're laughing. And my teacher was like, she's really hurt. Why are you laughing? And I was like, because I misunderstood. And like, and other times, like, I've had friends who were like laughing really hard. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. What can I do to support you? And they're like, no, it's something that's fucking funny. And I was like, great. And then like the most recent time it happened was not this past year, but last year, before I had my I'm leaving the room. This is the one that caused the I'm leaving the room policy to start. I was working as a scare actor at Universal Studios in their Bride of Frankenstein maze, and one of our Dracula brides, who happened to be played by a man, he fell and hit his head, and I could not tell if he was like scared or upset, and like I thought he was still fine because he was using what I had previously categorized as lighthearted voice, and I made a joke and I was like, don't worry, you only have one head, it's fine. And he looked at me and he's like, I'm really terrified right now because I might have a concussion, can you not joke please? And I was like, oh no, I have made this bad. I'm gonna go. And the walkout policy was born.
Yeah, probably better. You were also not lucky because you had 50-50. I said
every time it's the wrong choice. It's like guessing heads or tails, and you say heads and it's tails.
No, just go, it's better. And do you mask? You feel that it is natural for you like to be masking all the time, or you put your button like on and off?
It's I've been masking so long that it's hard for me to switch it off. The only times it really gets switched off is when I'm overstimulated and I'm having a meltdown. Like the other day, I was at Disneyland and literally, I even have a picture. I posted it online. You could see the moment that I got too overstimulated. Because it was on Space Mountain, and that ride can be very overstimulating at times. But this face I was making right here, I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah,
but you can see in my eyes, I'm like, I am overstimulated and I am not able to function, but I'm gonna mask. And then as soon as I got off the ride, I was just like overstimulated, nonverbal, couldn't mask, couldn't do anything. And I was also alone at Disneyland at the time. Like I didn't have anybody with me. I wasn't a part of a group. It was just me at Disneyland by myself. And so I had to figure out how to get around Disneyland by myself and handle a meltdown by myself and alone, which I did figure out the best way to do it. And when you have a meltdown at Disneyland, my recommendation is to go on the Fantasyland rides like Snow White, Peter Pan, because they're darker, they're quieter, they're smoother. So like it was a good chance for me to reset sensory wise.
Oh,
And
great.
like halfway through Pinocchio, I was like, okay, I'm okay.
Okay, now I'm good. And you were also wearing your headphones. I saw some posts that you did there.
Yes, I usually wear my headphones. Unfortunately, not all rides are headphone compatible. Like I can't wear headphones in California Screamin' because of the way that the the roller coaster thing it goes over your shoulder, and so the headphones will bounce around. So what I do instead is I put in earplugs for those rides. So and then I put the headphones when I get off. I wind up not taking them out and putting the headphones on over, so I have double the protection.
Yeah, you usually get it's a lot for you, like lots of noise, music, people talking, like all those noises.
Those overstimulate me so quickly. I cannot tell you how many times I've had meltdowns in class because I'm overwhelmed with the amount of noise. Like I remember it was a week into my senior year of high school. I was in theater and they had separated us into two groups to discuss something. And so there was like 15 people talking all at the exact same time. And I just got up and walked away because I could not handle it. And I had a meltdown in the hallway because I was just not okay. I have, and I also have meltdowns from like other odd sensory experiences. Like for example, when I was filming my short film, Simple Date, ironically, it was the night that we were filming a scene where I had to have a meltdown in the scene. And I wound up having a meltdown right before filming that because the temperature outside, it was 52 degrees. And I was wearing a very thin short sleeve shirt and a skirt. So I didn't really have a jacket. And the sensory aspect of being so cold, it felt like my skin was peeling off of it. Like I had a meltdown. I couldn't handle that. And so like I have meltdowns over sounds. I have meltdowns over touch. I've never had a meltdown due to food. That's one that's not happened yet because it's still possible.
But do you eat everything or do you have some restraints?
I do have some restraints. I do not eat peas. Peas are one of the most horrific textures I've ever felt in my life. Same with quinoa or boba. Like everyone loves boba tea. I hate boba. Hate it with a passion. Can't do it. Texture is horrendous. It's evil. I also don't eat cotton candy. I don't like anything that dissolves in my mouth instantly. I hate that texture. I do not like that. That is just, I like to chew my food. Thank you. And then I also, there are certain vegetables that I can't take the texture of, like squash or zucchini. Can't handle those. I do not like anything that is like too squishy. It has to have like a certain level of chewiness to it.
Okay. And do you do any, how was like the therapist? Have you done any therapy during all this process, like speech, psychotherapy? How was your life with therapists?
I finally started therapy in my adult life. I didn't do therapy when I was young because the options were not there for somebody who was getting diagnosed like in their teen years, for us at least. But I did do dialectical behavioral therapy, and I still do that with my current therapist. I've been in therapy for about 7 years now. And I find dialectical behavioral therapy to be more effective for autistic people than things like cognitive behavioral therapy or things like ABA,
Mm-hmm.
because dialectical behavioral therapy is very much about working from it's ground up instead of top down
Mm-hmm.
therapy, like, so the way that dialectical behavioral therapy will say, because like cognitive behavioral therapy will be like, okay, I'm having a bad time. Let me just tell myself I feel better until I feel better. Like that's cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
But dialectical behavioral therapy is, okay, I'm feeling terribly. I'm going to try and make myself feel as good as I can by validating my emotions, finding
Mm-hmm.
a safe way to express them. And once I feel like I can think logically, I'm going to go down to the root and figure out what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is more beneficial for autistic people than anything else, because when we're in a meltdown, we can't think logically. We have to focus on feelings. You have to make yourself feel better. You have to be safe until the meltdown's over. You got to ride that wave. But then after the wave is ridden and you're starting to feel better, then it's like, okay, what caused the meltdown? Let's get rid of that so that I can not melt down again.
Okay, great. So since we are talking about therapies, and you, I know that there are many misconceptions on many therapies, and I am one of the persons that I truly understand that. Usually, when we talk about applied behavior analysis, that ABA, I totally get it because I usually say that most applied behavior therapists, they are not good people. They are not. They don't understand about autism, and they care about the science, not about the people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the perspective that I have, like living inside the world of ABA since 2014. And then I started to, since the beginning, I don't know, maybe because I am a mom, I was always focusing on what was better for my kid, and then other kids once I started to be a professional.
Ziggy, stop.
No.
Sorry, that was my
Uh,
Alexa.
oh, no problem. Uh, so I totally get it, the perspective on why ABA could be harmful, could be bad. Um, what do you hear about? I don't know if you had experienced it, because what I see is that usually people uh they do some methods and they say that they are doing ABA, and also with really bad people who are not who does not respect what autism is and neurodiversity. Like they don't have this knowledge. I get that. I think that the science, it has good points, good things that we could use it, but it really needs to advance. Like it's so old school
Mm-hmm.
still, and we have like people training other therapists on being on this perspective, and then we have like a whole line of people with the same thoughts. I don't know if it is because I was in law school. My first degree is law. So I was always like to discuss and not to accept and
Mm-hmm.
to questionate. And this is seen as like, oh, you were smug, you were boring, you think you know more, you know better than the others. No, it's not about that. Because but I like to think outside the box and not accept things as they are told us. So what are your thoughts, like what have you heard about or seen or lived with ABA?
So I have talked to a lot of ABA therapists during my time working as an advocate, and during my advocacy for autistic people online. I've seen some very good therapists who listen to the community, and I've seen some very bad ones. Some examples of some very bad ones is when I will ask them, okay, because my I understand that unfortunately ABA, especially here in the United States, it's not going anywhere for a while. A lot of schools here make it mandatory that
Mm-hmm.
in order for your autistic child to be enrolled in school, they have to be enrolled in ABA therapy as well. That's an
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate reality. So a lot of students have no choice. A lot of parents have no choice but to put their kids in ABA. And I try not to shame those parents who don't have a lot of choices. But I do advocate for working with the therapist and stating, okay, learning the difference between harmful behaviors that can hurt the child or other people around it that should around the child that should be corrected, and behaviors that are not harmful, that aren't hurting anybody, that should just be left alone. Like for example, a harmful behavior that should be corrected is self-harm. If a child
Mm-hmm.
is harming themselves, that should be corrected. Or another behavior that can cause harm that I do recommend parents try and correct is toe walking, because or at least not try and correct it, but try and make sure that your child is not just toe walking,
Mm-hmm.
because a little bit of toe walking is fine. That's
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. But if your child is continuously just toe walking, that can actually hurt your child. That can affect the development of their ankles, of their legs and calves and toes. And that's something that you want to make sure is not happening. You don't want to hurt your child in the long form. Those are behaviors that I'm like, okay, yeah, I get correcting those. That because you don't want to do anything that will lead the child to physical harm later in life or emotional harm later in life. But behaviors that shouldn't be corrected, such as hand flapping or rocking, those are harming no one. Why correct those behaviors? If your child is having certain sensory aversions to foods, there are ways, or I don't think that a child should be forced to eat anything. In fact,
Yeah,
science has proven that if they are
I
forced to
agree.
eat, they're not gonna want to eat those things later in life. A child's sensory issues may change over time, and that's totally normal. Like, I used to not be able to handle the sensory aspect of broccoli. Love broccoli now. One of my favorite foods. I adore it. It's great. Broccoli is delicious. But I might not have found that if my mom had forced me to eat broccoli when I was younger. She actually did have a trick to trick me into eating it to make it a better sensory experience, was to melt cheese over it. That did help, which is
Yeah,
totally normal. But
fair
like I've
enough.
I've talked to some ABA therapists, some bad ones, where I said, okay, why are you correcting hand flapping if it's not hurting anyone? And their response is, well, the kid's gonna get made fun of if we don't correct that. So you got to correct it, because or else kids are gonna make fun of them. And I was like, okay, but why are we correcting a harmless behavior instead of correcting the children who are doing harm onto somebody else? And they said, well, because you can't just turn everything around to be about one kid. And I'll point out, studies show that when we do actually uh, adopt the curriculum in a way that autistic children understand, studies show that neurotypical children do better that way. Like, if it helps everyone, why are we not doing it? And they're just like, because we can't. Like, that's an example of a bad ABA therapist. But then some good ABA therapists that I've talked to, I actually convinced, because one of my former coworkers is an ABA therapist for his side job. I actually helped him create a policy in his ABA therapy group where they're no longer using food as a punishment or reward system. Because I pointed out to him, because I don't agree with ABA using if you do this right, you get a cracker. If you don't do it right, you don't
Mm-hmm.
get the cracker. And I explained to them, like, that's harmful. And my friend was like, wait, why is that harmful? And I was like, because autistic people are already more likely to have an eating disorder than any other group. And to use food as both punishment and reward, it sets up this expectation of food being needed as a reward. And if you don't do things right, you need to be punished. And that's eating disorder mind. That is laying the seeds for that autistic person to have an eating disorder. Food should never be used as a punishment or a reward system, because food is something that you use to sustain life. Anything that is an absolute necessity should never be a punishment or a reward. So like going to the bathroom, not a punishment or a reward. Drinking water, not a punishment or a reward. Eating, not a punishment or a reward. Sleeping, not a punishment or reward. Those things, those are all things that are completely necessary for life. And we should never put a quantifier on any of those things that makes us feel like we don't deserve them.
Yeah.
And so my friend listened to me and they were like, wow, I never even thought of it like that. And so they brought it to their supervisor and they now have a policy where they don't do that anymore. They still have snack time with the kids, but it's not, oh, if you do this right, you get the cracker. Now it's
just
okay, well, if
snack time.
Exactly. Now it's okay, if you do this right, you get to play a little bit longer.
It makes all sense. Like, I have never agreed with forcing a child to eat. I like the procedures. I can even read at the papers, the ABA procedures for food selectivity. Like, they are really bad. I don't like it. Like, you could use some strategies like your mother did with the cheese. So you can use other things, but like forcing. And usually parents, they say, oh, my kid, he has food selectivity. And when we ask, okay, so what does he eat? And they say, oh, they eat these, and these, and that. Like, when you see your child, he doesn't need therapy for these. Like, okay, you wanted him to eat better. Okay, every mother wants that. I believe that your mother, like, even now with you at 28 years old, she tells you should eat better, you should eat these or that.
Yep. Well, my mom has actually learned not to comment about my eating habits because I unfortunately am one of the autistic people who had an eating disorder for a long time. And so the only time my mom ever talks about my eating habits is because I recently discovered that I'm lactose intolerant. So if she catches me eating too much cheese or dairy, then she'll be like, you know how badly you're going to regret it. And then I just respond that some people were just not meant to have happiness. And then I go on eating the cheese anyways, even though it's very painful, but it's so delicious.
I want just now. I think about this later when I am in the bathroom.
Exactly. Speaking of bathroom, I will be right back. I have to use the restroom real quick.
Of course.
For water, not for cheese related.
Okay, of course. I paused the recording. So, like, great insights. Like, many ABA therapists or any therapist, they will hear us. And I hope that they rethink their practices. I really hope. And other things that also.
Please. I think that most ABA therapists who are, maybe this is just the optimist in me. I think most of them really do want to help the autistic community, and they think they're helping, but they're not. Like, they come at it with this idea of like, yeah, I'm going to help autistic people because they need help. And that's great. They should want to help autistic people. But in order to properly do that, they have to listen to autistic people and not assume that they know better. And that's where a lot of them struggle. A lot of them are like, no, you just don't understand because you're autistic. And it's like, no, I understand. I do understand because I'm autistic. I understand better than you will. So,
no, it makes total sense. And this view of autism for some of them maybe is a view that you are not so capable of thinking or doing things as I am because I am not autistic.
A lot of them think that that because we are not able to function in society the same exact way that they are, it means that we're not able to function at all. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We are perfectly able to function in society. Most of us anyways. There are some people, like, I don't ever want to sound like I'm saying that there aren't autistic people who will not be able to integrate as well into society, because that is absolutely a truth, but that can't be your basis to cloud the rest of the autism community. And that's the biggest issue that I see. Like, a lot of ABA therapists and a lot of parents who don't quite get it, they think that when autistic people talk about empowerment and things like that, they think that a lot of us are forgetting that some autistic people can't. And a lot of the times it's not that we're forgetting that there aren't autistic people who can. It's that we don't want them to be your only view of autism. We want you to remember that we exist just the same you want us to remember your children exist. We all have to coexist together within the autism community.
Okay. And speaking about the autism community, let's talk about Autism Speaks for the ones who doesn't know about, because we're in Brazil and this is an American association, but many of the professionals, they know Autism Speaks because, like, I don't know, but maybe it is the major association of autism, like
it is
the most
largest
known, I don't know.
It's the largest charity for autism in the entire world.
Wow. Yeah. Usually, so now April 2nd, probably this our talk will be released after sometime in April, because we have to translate and put subtitles and everything. But like April, now today is March 20. So it will be a lot of posts on Autism Speaks. And what is the hashtag? The blue light.
Light it up blue.
Yeah, light it blue. Yeah. So what is the problem with Autism Speaks? Because like people doesn't know this and they think that they are doing a good thing supporting Autism Speaks, but they don't know all the history.
So Autism Speaks originally started with the idea that they were going to find a cure for autism. They did not start removing that from their company bylaw until around 2015, I believe it was. It was very late. They, for the longest time, were pouring most of their donations into finding a cure for autism, which autism cannot be cured. It is impossible. There is no cure because it's not a disease. It is genetic, and it is caused by, at the moment, we know of over 100 genes that any one of them individually could cause autism, or a combination of any of them could cause autism. And at the same time, you can also inherit all of these genes that do carry autism without actually getting autism yourself, which is how we have a lot of people who are not autistic who have autistic parents. Or they're not autistic, but they have autistic kids. Although if you have an autistic child, I always recommend getting tested for autism yourself, because half of the time it came from a parent and they just didn't get diagnosed.
I always think on doing this. I always think on doing this. Like, I always think it's so funny because sometimes people write to me and say, "Oh, I believe you are autistic," and I say, okay, I don't have the diagnosis yet. I suffer from anxiety and depression. Yet I have these two diagnoses. It's because I really like to stay in my cave here in my house. I don't like to go out a lot. I like to stay with my books. I also don't like lots of noises. It really upsets me. But I don't have the diagnosis yet. But let's see how this goes.
You know, it always could happen. But Autism Speaks was very much trying to cure that. Autism is not anything to be cured. Even the people with the higher support needs, the people who will never integrate into society, they still have a right to be here. They still have a right to exist exactly as they are. And Autism Speaks for the longest time did not believe that. On top of that, Autism Speaks was also the promoters of the puzzle piece as a symbol for autism, and they described it as showing that autism is both a puzzling condition, and on top of that, autism is when you have an autistic child, there is a piece missing that does not make them a whole human. That was a big rhetoric of theirs for a long time. And that was also the rhetoric of the person who started ABA therapy. The person who started ABA therapy said, when you look at an autistic person, you're really looking at the shell of a human being. They look like a human being, they sound like a human being, but there's nothing in them. And you have to fill the humanity inside them with ABA. Like that was their stance. Horrendous and so dehumanizing. And on top of all of that, as if that wasn't enough, if you really want to figure out how Autism Speaks feels about autism, look up their commercial, I Am Autism. The commercial, I Am Autism, literally states, I am autism. I work faster than pediatric cancer or AIDS. Two things that kill people. And
I have never seen this video.
Oh, it's sad. It talks about how I am autism. If you have a happy marriage, I will make sure that it ends. If you have, I will drain all of your money. I will drain all of your finances. I will isolate you from your friends and family. It really made autism just this horrendous, evil thing in their commercial. And it's because for the longest time, that's what they believed, was that autism was this dangerous thing. And it's not. Autism just is a part of life. It's not a good or a bad thing. It is just a thing. And they've also in the past released videos with documentaries of mothers stating that when they drove home from their child getting a diagnosis of autism, that they heavily considered just driving off a bridge with their child in the car and unaliving themselves and their children. Autism Speaks has promoted those videos. On top of that, they've also donated to the legal funds of people who have killed their children because their children were autistic. Because they stated in their article about that, a lot of people just don't understand how hard it is to have an autistic child. These were all things that happened, most of these things happened in the early 2000s. And also at the same exact time while they were doing that, they were promoting the idea that vaccines cause autism. And that led to a huge rise in things like measles, in things like oh my God, all the other viruses like that were eradicated in the United States.
Mm-hmm. I don't know the name in English, but I know what you were talking about.
Yeah, like all of these things that were supposed to be gone in the United States, the smallpox, we had completely eradicated these things from the United States. And in comes Autism Speaks, promoting the one doctor out of hundreds of thousands. There has been one doctor who found evidence that that vaccines were linked with autism. And he lost his license because that study that he found was fabricated. But yet Autism Speaks promoted that rhetoric for so long. So because of organizations like Autism Speaks, we have one of the largest anti-vax movements in a century. We had so many people refusing to get the COVID vaccine. Part of the reason was that they didn't think that they thought that it would cause autism. We had so many people not getting the measles vaccine because they thought it caused autism. We had so many people, there were infants dying of smallpox because their parents were afraid that their kids would be autistic if they gave them the vaccine. Like
they would prefer a kid sick than a kid,
but even child. They would prefer a dead child instead of an autistic living child. And Autism Speaks was at the helm of that. There are a lot of people who think that Autism Speaks can do a rebranding and make up for what they've done to the community, I personally am of the opinion that they have done so much irreparable damage that the only thing that they can do is shut down and give their money to autistic people directly. Because that's another thing. They, despite being a nonprofit, very little of the money that is donated to them goes to helping autistic people and their families. In fact, most of it over the years has gone to research about autism and vaccines.
Wow. And maybe cure.
Yeah. That's where most of the money has gone to. Very little of it has actually helped autistic people. If autism speaks, and on top of all of that, as if all of that weren't bad enough, they actually, until 2014, a company policy where autistic employees were not allowed to have positions of high authority or high paying positions in the company at all. And then when they did eventually start having autistic people on their board, because they realized that the community hated them, they invited people onto their board, and every single board member quit within 2 years because they weren't being listened to. They just don't listen to the community. And they found that they played a game of fuck around and find out on TikTok this week, because Autism Speaks actually decided to join TikTok. And
they are there.
Oh yeah. The autism community found them, and found them fast. And they got hundreds of thousands of views and tens of thousands of hate comments from the autism community on every single video. The autism community has been just demolishing them online right now, to the point where they had to turn off comments.
Yeah, that's probably they trying to rebrand themselves in TikTok.
They've been trying to do that with autistic influencers. Like, I know for sure about 2 years ago, they reached out to Paige Lale to work with her. And Paige said absolutely not. Because Autism Speaks, no. But they were trying to get influencers. They were trying to get any autistic influencers that they could to say nice things about them and work with them. Every single one of them has said no. So now they're trying to do it on their own and do their own TikToks, and they're not doing well.
I won't be surprised if they create an autistic person, like someone with a wrong diagnosis, like saying that this person is autistic. It won't surprise me. I probably, you feel the same.
I think that what they're probably more likely to do is they're more likely to find an autism mom, because moms of autistic children love Autism Speaks, no matter what the autism community says. I've gotten into so many fights with parents of autistic children stating, hey, the community doesn't like this, and they've stated, well, I like it, so there. And it's like, okay, but is it about you, or is it about your children? Is it about you, or is it about all autistic people? And that is one of the areas where I've gotten in the most fights with parents of autistic kids about, is because a lot of the times, don't get me wrong, I think parents are a necessary part of the autism community. I do feel that they are, because for some autistic people, their parents are the only way that they have of connecting to the autism community and at all. But I do think that parents, when it comes to issues like that, I think that's when they need to learn. I think they need to learn when their voice is needed and when it's not. Because when it's
not their place to speak.
Exactly. Like, when it comes to, hey, how do we best support autistic people and their families? that's a place for autism moms to speak. Absolutely. Raise the roof, raise your voice, shout, scream. We need you, because, you know, they have firsthand knowledge of what it's like to raise an autistic child. But when it comes to what the community wants to see from allyship, then it's not their place to state, oh, this is the correct way for autistic people. This is the correct way for autistic. That's not your place. When it comes to families and raising autistic children, absolutely, please, we need you. But when it comes to telling us what we do and don't like and what we do and don't need for ourselves, that's when it's time to listen to us.
Yeah, you need to respect and listen. That's a huge thing that we are always aware on doing this with our son, telling him the facts when something happens, and letting him make his decisions. And of course, he's 11 now, but he will grow up. So
Yeah,
he said that he wants to get married and things like that.
I love that.
Yeah, and so you need to respect your son. You need to you can't like think that, oh, he's autistic, he doesn't know what he wants. He doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
He doesn't know how he's feeling. No, you need to validate. And sometimes you will be able to do what he wants, sometimes not, depends on the age, but you need to validate.
And sometimes he doesn't know what he's feeling, and that's okay. Like, sometimes I don't know what I'm feeling. That's one of my struggles as an autistic person a lot of the times, is knowing my own emotions, like, and identifying them. But that doesn't mean I can't be validated. Sometimes it's just, oh, you don't know how you feel? Okay. That's okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
You don't have to know how you feel. You just know that you don't feel good, and that's valid. So let's figure out how we can make you feel better. And that's perfectly acceptable. And, you know, there are certain things that are very hard. A lot of the autism community can be very sensitive, understandably so, because, you know, we are used to being spoken over by every other community. We start movements, and then those movements speak over us. And we try with parents, and then sometimes parents speak over us, but sometimes we do speak over parents. I've seen a lot of people who have been like, well, if your kid doesn't want to bathe, don't bathe them. If they don't want to brush their teeth, don't make them brush their teeth. And I gotta disagree with the community here, or with members of the community who are saying that, because those things are about the health of the child. A child's health has to come before all others, and
not negotiable.
When a kid doesn't brush their teeth, that can lead to cavities, which can lead to root canals, and even worse, extractions. There's so many, like, you can get an infection that can get into your bloodstream if you have bad teeth. I know, because I'm at risk from them because I didn't brush my teeth enough. And my mom tried her best. Don't get me wrong. Like, both my parents tried very hard to make sure that I was brushing my teeth, that I was bathing regularly. It's about working with, when it comes to that stuff, because yes, those things are sensory nightmares for me, but it's about working with your child to try and make it as comfortable as possible. So, like, if your child thinks that showers are too much of a sensory overload, that's okay. Baths are great. You can have your stim toys, you can have your play toys. And if even a bath is too uncomfortable sensory wise, teach them sanitary wipes. You know, they make sanitary wipes for your skin and for your genitals and things like that. Those can be a big help when your autistic child is not able to bathe. Teeth brushing, I'm still figuring that one out. I have not figured out a way to make that
the better solution.
Yeah.
Electric? Do you like electric?
I actually prefer not to have electric. I prefer to have a handheld toothbrush. I don't know why. It feels like a control issue, I think, because like, I know that I'm the one doing everything, which makes it easier for me. I do think mouthwash, like certain mouthwashes can be not a permanent substitute, but like if your child is having a day where they really can't brush their teeth because they're too overwhelmed sensory wise, just say, okay, just today you can go you can go gargle with mouthwash, because that'll at least kill some bacteria. It'll do something.
Better than nothing, of course.
Yeah. And like if you can even like, it's not ideal, but if you can only get your child to brush their teeth once a day, that's still something. That's better than not at all. Always remember that something is better than nothing.
Yeah. Maybe it is not something that you wanted, something that you expected, but you need to like accept and little progress, commemorate little victories.
Exactly. Because if you don't celebrate the little victories, no one else will.
Yeah. And that's the example that we are setting for them, to celebrate the little victories.
Absolutely. Like when I eventually have children, because I'm reaching that like point because I'm nearing 30, and the closer I get to 30, the more I feel my ovaries and uterus going, hey, it's baby time. And I'm like, no, it's not. I'm poor. I don't have a husband. I don't have money. I don't have the sanity. We're not doing that yet. But, I know I will eventually. Like I do. I really do want to have a baby eventually. And when I do, I want to find a way to balance focusing on my child's autonomy and taking care of them and empowering them to take care of themselves. And I think the best way to empower them to take care of themselves is to always celebrate when they do these things. Like, even if it's something that should be the bare minimum, throw a freaking party, because that will teach your child to praise themselves for the little things. I also try and avoid punishment. Like I want to try and avoid punishment mindset, because I think so many of us have carried on punishment mindsets into adulthood. And instead of taking accountability, we punish ourselves. And that's not what accountability is. Accountability is not punishment. Accountability is acknowledging wrong done and doing what you can to rectify the harm caused. And I hope that when I do have children, that I do that as well.
Okay, great. And just a last question, because I want to let you go. If you had a magic wand that you could cure autism, would you? Or are you happy the way you are and you don't need to be cured?
I know I don't need to be cured, but I'm not always happy the way I am. It's a very complicated question, because like a lot of people think that it's a very black and white thing where like you either want a cure or you're perfectly fine with being autistic. And for most of us, I think most of us do fall in between, where we're like, okay, I don't want a cure. I don't need to be cured, but things would be easier. And there's a difference between acknowledging that things are often hard and wanting to be a different person, because I don't feel that autism needs to be cured, but I'm not always comfortable with my autism. I'm getting there. I'm having more comfortable days than non-comfortable days, but I do have those, especially when I have falling outs with friends because of autism. I have those moments where I'm like, wow, I wish I wasn't autistic, because that wouldn't happen. But then every time I have those thoughts, I always try and remind myself, wait a second. Okay, yes, this was an autism thing. And if I cured that would be easy, but I might take away all of the amazing things that I do love about myself. Because would I love sharks enough for a shark wall if I wasn't autistic? Would I be as good of an actress if I wasn't autistic? Would I be as passionate about helping people if I wasn't autistic? I think that even when I'm not comfortable or happy with my autism, I try and always remember that my autism has put more good in the world than it has given me bad. Like, even though the bad stuff feels really bad, it's done so much more net positive than anything. And I try and always remind myself of that.
Yeah, and another thing is that it's part of being human. If you were not autistic, you would probably had other things to
Yeah.
work on and other problems. So I just think that it's part of being human, and being like everyone is different, and we all struggle with our things, and we all have our issues. So I think that we also thinking on this perspective, it also gives us, okay, if it wasn't autistic, autism could be other things.
Mm-hmm.
So it is what it is. And I believe that for the parent side, when they want a cure, usually it's because they are afraid of, like, I got this really soon that my son was autistic, and autism was part of who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I accepted that. But I think that for most parents, they are just like so afraid of their kid not being independent and what will be on their life once they're gone, and difficulties that his kid or her kid will have in life. So I think that probably it's because of this that they say cure, but also because people usually want to be like everyone else. They want
I
to be like the normal thing that I don't know what it is, but what is socially accepted and things like that.
I think a lot of parents, because I've said this before in a few videos, like a lot of parents who are talking about the struggles of being a parent of an autistic kid, they they blame autism not because they hate their child, but because they see that as the problem instead of the actual problem, which is a society that doesn't support autistic people or our families. Like, they misplace their anger at autism instead of placing it at society for not providing them the support that they deserve. Because families in general, especially here in the United States, I can't speak to Brazil, but here in the United States, families are not supported enough, whether or not there's autism in the family at all. I mean, we have Republicans are currently trying to take away free lunch for children in school. Like, and the thing is, they know that it doesn't cost that much, and they know that it's not that expensive to feed kids, but they still want to take it away. And I'm like, why are you not allowing parents to feel supported with their kids? We should be taking better care of families. We should be giving paid family leave, and we should be giving more supports so that people can have disabled children. Like, because I know so many families who were totally fine, like monetarily, they were totally fine. And then their child had an accident and their child became disabled. And now they're not fine financially. Now they're destitute. That shouldn't be a risk. It should not take that. Your community should be taking care of you. And I wish more parents of autistic kids knew that they deserve more support.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So great, such a great talk and such important topics. I hope that we have a number two
Yes,
to
I would
talk
love
on.
to.
We have so much to talk about, because I know you have your Instagram and TikTok, and
Mhm.
I will put all the links of the Instagram account and TikTok on the video notes on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. But we also know that many people in Brazil won't have like access. They will see your pictures and your videos, but they won't like truly understand many things because of the language. So that's why it's so great, because we will organize all this content and putting the subtitles in Portuguese. So every parent, therapist, they will be able to watch and learn. So that's why I really, really hope that we have another opportunity to talk about, because we have so much to cover, like sexuality and many things.
Sexuality and autism is my favorite thing to talk about. I literally, like, I'm a writer, a screenwriter, as well as an actress. And every time I write something, I always put autism and sexuality and also pregnancy in the same thing, because those are three things that autistic people are not allowed to talk about or experience in mainstream media. So I try and do all three of those in everything I write.
No, we need this. We need to have this talk, and we need to have professionals who are ready to work with these adults and with these topics.
Absolutely.
We definitely will. So thank you so much, Rebecca. It was like a pleasure, and I hope one day I will go to California, and we can be able to meet in person.
We'll go to Disneyland together.
Yeah, please.
All right.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.